Title: Blades of Guardian. Chapter 1. Blood on the Wind. The desert wind howled like a mourning widow. Dust devils danced across the sun-bleached road as Zhao Han rode alone, his son slumped asleep behind him on the horse. The vast wasteland known as the Scarlet Expanse stretched before them, endless and cruel. The skies burned red in the twilight, and even the crows kept to the shadows. He adjusted the straw hat that hid his worn face. Beneath it, his eyes never stopped watching, scanning every rise and bush. After 12 years of war, betrayal, and death, his instincts were sharper than any blade. Behind him, the boy stirred. "Father, are we there yet?" "Not yet," Zhao Han replied. "Just a little further." He told the boy the same thing every day. He had no destination, only the next job, the next village, the next enemy. A sound, a faint ring of steel, broke the wind's cry. He stopped, dismounted. The boy blinked awake. "What is it?" "Stay with the horse." He stepped forward, one hand drifting to the hilt of the curved saber at his hip. The desert grass hissed softly as something slithered within it. From the shadows, 5 figures emerged, faces wrapped in cloth, blades drawn. "Zhao Han," the lead one said. "The Nightshade Sect sends their regards." Zhao Han's expression did not change. "I told your master 10 years ago, if he wanted to kill me, he should have done it himself." "He sends his regrets," the assassin smirked. The fight began without warning. Blades flashed in the dying light. Zhao Han moved like a shadow unchained, his saber drawing blood in arcs of crimson light. The first man fell with a gurgle. The second's throat parted before he even saw the strike. The third parried once, twice, then screamed as Zhao Han's blade shattered his guard and split his shoulder. The remaining 2 backed off, circling warily. Zhao Han's breath was steady, his clothes were tattered, but his form never faltered. "Go back to your master," he said to the last 2. "Tell him I'm not dead yet." One fled, the other lunged. Zhao Han turned his body sideways, letting the blade pass by, then buried his saber in the assassin's gut. When it was done, he wiped his blade clean on the man's robes. The boy hadn't moved. He'd seen it before. "Father," he said softly. "Who were they?" "Ghosts," Zhao Han replied. "From a past that won't stay buried." He remounted. The boy clung to him. As they rode on into the dusk, the wind carried a whisper. The Nightshade Sect has returned, and Zhao Han knew peace would not come easily, not until every debt was paid in blood. Chapter 2. Black Sand Ridge. The settlement of Black Sand Ridge sat like a scar upon the desert, ringed by jagged rocks and half-buried bones. Traders passed through it by necessity, not choice. It was the kind of place where men kept knives in their sleeves and women wore secrets like perfume. Zhao Han arrived at dusk. The gates were open, but the guards didn't greet him. They just stared. 2 men in rusted armor who recognized the way his saber rode against his hip. "Another sellsword," one muttered. "Maybe," said the other, "or maybe worse." Zhao said nothing. His son Jing held tighter to his back. Inside, the town stank of sweat and horse piss. Dust clung to the wooden beams and awnings like moss. An inn called the Red Kettle stood near the square. He dismounted and handed a single silver tael to the stable boy without a word. Inside the inn, silence fell as he entered. Men looked up from their rice bowls, eyes narrowing. A few turned away. The innkeeper was a woman with graying hair tied in a tight knot. She met Zhao's gaze without blinking. "Rooms are upstairs. You pay first." Zhao laid down 3 tiles. 2 nights, maybe more. She nodded, gave him a room key, then asked, "You here for work?" "Maybe." "A caravan was hit 2 days ago, 20 dead. People say it was the Nightshade Sect." Zhao's eyes narrowed. "They're here?" She shrugged. "That's what folks whisper. Someone's paying top coin to make problems. You want work? Talk to the iron merchant in the West Ward." He led Jing upstairs. The room was plain but serviceable. Mattress on the floor, basin, a cracked window looking out over the western ridge. Later that night, Zhao visited the iron merchant. His name was Bao Yun, a squat man with a golden tooth and a dozen bodyguards. "You don't look like much," Bao Yun said, tossing a pouch of coins on the table. "But I hear you've killed Nightshade before." "I've buried more of them than you've fingers." Bao Yun grinned. "Good. I have a job. Something's stirring in the Ghost Wind Gorge. 2 of my caravans vanished. I want it cleaned out. Ghost Wind's cursed. I pay well." Zhao picked up the pouch. "I leave at first light." As he walked back through the streets, he felt eyes watching. A flutter in the shadows. Someone moved on the rooftops, silent and fast. He ducked into an alley. Steel sang. A blade slashed where his neck had been a second before. Zhao's saber flashed up. Sparks flew. The attacker wore nightshade black, face covered, twin daggers gleaming. "You weren't supposed to live this long," the assassin hissed. "Tell your master," Zhao growled. "I'm not done dying yet." They clashed in the dark, blades ringing in deadly rhythm. And far above, on the rooftop of the Red Kettle, a pale figure watched the fight with eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. A shadow from Zhao Han's past. A ghost that refused to stay buried. Chapter 3. The shadow of Chang'an, once the heart of civilization and trade, now lay veiled in dusk's amber glow. The stone roads were silent, save for the muffled clatter of hooves and the occasional creak of a merchant S-cart. From the rooftops, banners fluttered like broken wings, worn by time and war. Dao Ma entered the city under the guise of a traveling tradesman. His wide-brimmed hat obscured his eyes, and his cloak bore the dust of many miles. Yet, beneath the humble exterior, lay a warrior honed by death and vengeance. He had come to this city not for coin, but for a name, Wu Jinghai. This man, once a warlord in the northern steppes, had risen in ranks under the corrupt minister of war. He now commanded a hidden network of assassins, smugglers, and enforcers, choking the city from within. Rumor had it that Wu Jinghai had ties to the massacre of Dao Ma's clan. In the shadowed alleys, Dao Ma met with Ji Ro, a former spy turned herbalist. Her stall sold rare medicines, but her knowledge of city politics was even rarer. She gave him information for a price, not in gold but in favors. One such favor involved delivering a warning to an imprisoned general before his execution. "Why help me?" Dao Ma asked. Ji Ro's smile was bitter. "Because I have my own ghosts. Wu Jinghai murdered my brother." As the moon rose over Chang'an, the city seemed to hold its breath. Dao Ma vanished into the winding streets, where shadows whispered secrets and vengeance was only a blade's width away. Chapter 4. Blades Beneath Lantern Light. Chang'an came alive at night. Lanterns swayed on bamboo poles, painting the streets in hues of gold and vermilion. Music drifted from tea-houses and brothels, mingling with laughter, footsteps, and the metallic hiss of sharpening blades. Beneath the surface glamour, the city pulsed with tension. Dao Ma moved through the crowds like a silent shadow. The message for General Liang had to be delivered before sunrise. Ji Ro's instructions were precise. Enter the prison from the eastern gate disguised as a food vendor, bribe the outer guard, and whisper the passphrase, "Crimson willow blooms twice." He passed through the layers of guards and stone corridors until he reached the cell. General Liang, once a hero of the border wars, now sat shackled and bruised. The message was short. "Your loyalists gather at Red Cliff Pass. Hold until the moon wanes." Liang's eyes burned with resolve. "Tell Ji Ro, the fire is not dead." But as Dao Ma turned to leave, he was ambushed. Wu Jinghai's men had anticipated the move. Steel clashed under the flickering torchlight. Dao Ma fought fiercely, his blade dancing with precision, born from years of hardship. Blood stained the stones. He escaped, wounded but alive. Outside, fireworks exploded in the sky, celebrating the city's spring festival. Yet under the revelry, Daomar bled beneath the same lanterns that once lit the paths of lovers. Revenge had a price, and tonight he paid in blood. Chapter 5. Whisper of the Scabbard. Snow fell upon the highlands beyond Chang'an, blanketing the landscape in silence. Daomar rode west through the cold wind, his wound dressed hastily beneath his cloak. He did not ride alone. Jiru had sent her best tracker, Tianfei. A quiet woman with eyes like a hawk and 2 twin sabers crossed on her back. "You should rest," she said, as they paused near a frozen stream. "You lost too much blood." "No time," Daomar replied. "Wu Jinghai will strike Red Cliff before the moon wanes. Liang must be freed by then." They traveled by hidden paths, avoiding patrols. On the second night, they sheltered in the ruins of an old watchtower where Tianfei brewed bitter herbs for his fever. Around a small fire, they shared stories, hers of lost siblings, his of a brother who died at the hands of a traitor. "You fight like someone who has nothing left," she said. "Because I don't," he answered. Before dawn, a scout from Jiru arrived with news. The northern outpost had been taken, and Liang's loyalists had fallen back. A message burned into wood revealed a betrayal. Someone within their ranks had given up the Red Cliff strategy. Daomar clenched his fists. "We have a traitor." The wind howled through the broken walls. Tianfei stood. "Then let's find them before Wu Jinghai does." They set out under the grey sky, bound for a reckoning both within their ranks and against the man who had turned their empire into ash. Chapter 6. Steel beneath the mask. The foothills of Red Cliff loomed like sleeping beasts, their craggy faces draped in mist. Daomar and Tianfei approached under cover of fog, slipping between the sentry roots like shadows. The deeper they moved into Allied territory, the more the air felt wrong, too quiet, too still. Within Red Cliff's battered fortress, Commander Liang stood before a dwindling map, hands clasped tightly behind his back. His once proud army had been reduced to a few hundred loyal fighters, morale shaken by whispers of betrayal. Daomar entered without ceremony. "Your ghost returns," Liang said, a rare smile tugging at his tired features. "I bring more than ghosts," Daomar said. "We have a spy. The north outpost fell from within." Liang's expression hardened. "Do you have a name?" Daomar exchanged a look with Tianfei. She stepped forward and laid down a blood-marked strip of cloth, part of a signal flag from the scout ambushed at Dusk Pass. On it was the mark of the Jade Serpent clan. "Kai Xin," she said, "one of your own captains." Liang's jaw tensed. "Then justice must be swift." Under the cover of night, they arranged a sting. Tianfei intercepted a message bound for Wu Jinghai, and using it, they set a trap near the collapsed gate of the old granary. When Kai Xin arrived, cloaked and cautious, he found more than a hidden messenger. He found Daomar's blade. "What have they promised you?" Daomar asked. Kai Xin smirked. "A future, something this broken empire can't offer." Steel rang against steel. It was no duel, it was retribution. When it ended, Kai Xin lay at the feet of his own greed, bleeding out beneath the watch of those he betrayed. That night, the men of Red Cliff burned the traitor's body and swore anew beneath the war banners. And in the dark beyond the cliffs, Wu Jinghai received word of the spy's death. He only laughed. "Let them have their justice. It won't save them." Chapter 7. Ashes of Loyalty. Morning brought the sound of hammering from Red Cliff's inner wall. Reinforcements were being hastily built. Barricades patched, broken gates fortified, pikes laid in layers like dragon teeth. The warriors, though few, moved with grim determination. The execution of Kai Xin had ignited something that had long been dormant. Defiance. Daomar stood atop the battlements, watching the horizon. He was no longer a lone wolf. The fire in his eyes now matched the banners that snapped above him. Tianfei joined him with a leather-wrapped scroll. "New orders from Jiru," she said. She wants us to delay Wu Jinghai until her reinforcements arrive from the southern gorge. Dao Ma frowned. That's a 5-day march. We won't last 2. But Liang was already setting his plan into motion. Hidden trenches were dug around the cliff base. False paths were laid with spring traps and caltrops. The fortress would become a maze of death. As night approached, scouts reported movement. Wu Jinghai's forces were advancing. A sea of torches bled through the valley, their firelight painting the fog red. We face an army 10 times our size, Liang declared to his soldiers. But they carry greed and arrogance. We carry names. We carry the fallen. The Red Cliff warriors slammed their fists to their chests in answer. The siege began before midnight. Arrows blotted out the stars. Siege ladders rose like skeletal fingers. Dao Ma fought from the parapets, blade flashing, his every strike precise. Beside him, Tianfei danced with her sabers, grim and swift. Bodies fell. Fires roared. Yet amidst the chaos, Dao Ma noticed something. The enemy soldiers weren't just mercenaries. They moved with training, uniformity, discipline. These aren't hired swords, he told Liang. They're black sworn, Wu Jinghai's personal death guard. Liang's eyes narrowed. Then he's here himself. From the shadow of the cliff, a single figure approached. Tall, cloaked, and calm. Wu Jinghai. He stopped just within bow range, raised a hand and called out, "Surrender, and I shall let your wounded live. Resist, and none shall see dawn." Dao Ma stepped forward. "No one here fears dawn," he said, voice cutting through wind and war. And so the bloodiest night began, with ash falling like snow and the fortress walls ringing with the song of vengeance. Chapter 8. Ember and Iron. The morning after the siege left, Red Cliff cloaked in smoke and silence. Corpses carpeted the blood-soaked earth, both friend and foe frozen in final defiance. The walls, blackened and broken, still stood. Dao Ma limped through the battlefield, blade dragging, knuckles raw. His eyes, bloodshot and weary, passed over the faces of the fallen, each one a name he would not forget. Lung emerged from the infirmary tent covered in blood, not all of it his. Tianfei's stable took a spear to the shoulder. Dao Ma nodded. And the rest? Half the defenders are gone. No word from Jiru. We held, but the price? We're not done. Beneath the fortress, deep in the oldest armory, Dao Ma unearthed a relic, an ancestral weapon sealed by the guardians of the outer clans. The Ember Blade. Forged of meteorite and enchanted iron, it pulsed when his fingers closed around the hilt. The blade chooses those willing to burn, whispered Liang. That night, as Red Cliff mourned and rebuilt, Dao Ma stood alone by the edge of the cliff. He whispered the names of the dead to the wind, then he whispered one more. Wu Jinghai. The ember in his blade flared to life. The war was far from over. Chapter 9. The Fires of Vengeance. Red Cliff had been a symbol of resilience, but in the wake of the battle, it was reduced to a shadow of its former glory. The heavy scent of blood still lingered in the air, mingling with the acrid smoke from the smouldering remains of the battlefield. The once proud walls now bore the marks of Wu Jinghai's relentless assault. Dao Ma stood at the summit of the cliff, the ember blade still warm in his grasp. The weapon had a weight that was different from any blade he had ever wielded. It felt as though it had chosen him, as though its power was waiting to be unlocked. He could hear the distant rumblings of thunder, a storm brewing on the horizon. Liang approached, his face grim. The survivors are ready. We have enough men to march on Wu Jinghai's stronghold, but we don't have time. He won't wait for us to lick our wounds. Dao Ma looked out across the valley, his gaze unwavering. Then we move at once. We'll show him that the Red Cliff is not so easily shattered. The journey was long and arduous, but Dao Ma's resolve had been tempered in the flames of battle. With each step, he felt the ember blade pulsing, calling to him. The vengeance he sought was within reach. At night, they camped in the foothills. Dao Ma couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, the faces of the fallen came to him, their spirits lingering, calling out for justice. Suddenly, the ground trembled. The earth cracked, and a massive rift opened before them. From the darkness, figures began to emerge. Black Sworn, the elite warriors of Wu Jinghai. "Stay sharp," Liang commanded, drawing his blade. The Black Sworn advanced, their footsteps like thunder. They were fast, their movements a blur as they descended upon the Red Cliff warriors. Dao Ma's heart raced. This was no longer just a fight for survival. This was a fight for redemption. Dao Ma met the first of the Black Sworn with a slash of the ember blade. The weapon seemed to ignite with the very fury of his rage, cutting through the darkness with a brilliance that matched the intensity of the storm above. The clash was deafening. Dao Ma moved through the chaos like a whirlwind, his every strike precise, his every step a calculated move in the dance of vengeance. But the Black Sworn were no ordinary fighters. They were relentless, and with each strike they sought to break his spirit. But Dao Ma could not be broken. The battle raged on for what seemed like hours, the clash of steel and the cries of warriors filling the air. When the dust finally settled, the Black Sworn had been vanquished, their bodies littering the ground. Dao Ma stood amidst the carnage, the ember blade still glowing brightly. He breathed heavily, his body weary, but his spirit remained unbroken. "We move forward," he said, his voice steady. "Wu Jinghai is waiting." And so, the fires of vengeance burned brighter than ever before, propelling them forward on their path to the enemy's stronghold. Chapter 10. The Final Confrontation. The stronghold of Wu Jinghai loomed on the horizon, a dark silhouette against the blood-red sky. The journey had been long, and the toll it had taken on Dao Ma and his warriors was undeniable. But the ember blade in his hand burned with a purpose, and the fires of vengeance refused to be extinguished. The forces of Wu Jinghai were numerous, but Dao Ma had no intention of retreating. His heart was set on one thing only, the end of this war and the fall of the demon who had caused so much suffering. Red Cliff, his comrades, and the fallen would not be forgotten. They would have their justice. As they approached the gates of Wu Jinghai's stronghold, Dao Ma paused. He could feel the weight of the ember blade. The very air seemed to crackle with energy, as though the weapon was calling out to him. The storm above them had grown fiercer, and the ground trembled with the anticipation of the battle to come. "This is it," Liang said, his voice grave. "We'll either take him down, or we'll die trying." Dao Ma nodded, his gaze fixed on the enemy fortress. "There is no other option. We finish this, or we never leave." They charged forward, the warriors of Red Cliff following him with relentless determination. The gates of the stronghold were opened in a heartbeat, and the battle raged as they stormed inside. Wu Jinghai's soldiers met them head-on, but they were no match for the fury of Dao Ma and his comrades. The ember blade blazed with every strike, cutting through the enemy ranks with a power that left nothing but devastation in its wake. The fight was brutal, but Dao Ma's resolve was unshakable. And then, at the heart of the stronghold, he saw him. Wu Jinghai, standing tall and unmoved, his eyes cold as ice. Dao Ma approached, the ember blade crackling with energy, its flame more intense than ever. "This ends now, Wu Jinghai," he said, his voice filled with a fury that matched the power of the weapon in his hand. Wu Jinghai smirked, unfazed by the oncoming storm. "You think you've won? You think this ends with me?" Dao Ma's eyes narrowed. "It ends with me." The battle between the two warriors began, a clash of might and fury. Wu Jinghai fought with the precision of a seasoned warrior, his every move calculated and deadly. But Dao Ma was different now. The ember blade pulsed with his rage, with the anger of all those he had lost. Each strike was fueled by vengeance, and each blow sent shockwaves through the ground. The fight was long and grueling, both warriors pushing themselves to the limits. Wu Jinghai's power was immense, but Dao Ma's determination could not be matched. With a final, decisive strike, Dao Ma drove the ember blade deep into Wu Jinghai's chest. The demon lord gasped, his eyes widening with disbelief. For a moment, he stood frozen, unable to comprehend the reality of his defeat. And then he fell. The stronghold of Wu Jinghai crumbled around them, the walls shaking as the demon lord's reign came to an end. Dao Ma stood over his fallen enemy, the ember blade still glowing with a fierce light. His chest heaved with exhaustion, but his heart was finally at peace. Liang approached, his face somber. "It's over," he said quietly. Dao Ma nodded, his gaze drifting to the horizon. "Yes, it's over." But even as the battle came to a close, Dao Ma knew that the war for justice would never truly end. The ashes of the past would always burn in his soul, but now he carried them with honor. The red cliff had fallen, but its spirit would live on in him. And so Dao Ma walked forward, the ember blade at his side, ready to face whatever the future might hold, for the fallen, for vengeance, for justice. Epilogue. Legacy of ashes and ember. The winds of change swept through the war-torn lands, scattering the ashes of the fallen and carrying with them the whispers of a new era. The stronghold of Wu Jinghai, once a symbol of oppression and power, now lay in ruins. Its towers had crumbled, its dark forces scattered to the wind, and its name forever erased from the pages of history. Dao Ma stood at the edge of the ruins, his gaze lost in the horizon, where the sun was beginning to rise over a world that was slowly healing. The ember blade, now dulled from countless battles, hung by his side, a reminder of the price that had been paid. The war was over, but the scars it had left on the land and in the hearts of the people would not fade so easily. Beside him, Liang stood quietly, watching as the last remnants of the enemy's forces were cleared away. The air was thick with the scent of burned earth, but beneath the acrid smell, there was a hint of something else. Hope. "The world has changed," Liang said softly, his voice carrying the weight of their journey. "We've won, but there's still much to rebuild." Dao Ma nodded. "A victory comes at a cost. We've lost so much, but we've also gained something. The future is ours to shape." In the distance, the first signs of life began to stir. The people, the warriors, and the survivors of Red Cliff were returning to the land they had fought so hard to protect. The banners of their fallen comrades were being raised once more, this time not in the name of war, but of peace. Dao Ma's heart was heavy, but he had found the one thing that had eluded him for so long: closure. The vengeance he had sought, the justice he had craved, had been achieved. But now, in the stillness of the morning, he realized that his path had not been solely for revenge. It had been for something greater, the preservation of those who still lived, the memory of those who had fallen, and the hope for a world no longer ruled by darkness. Tianfei, though scarred, was by his side, her sabers now sheathed in peace. The bond they had forged in battle had not been broken by the horrors they had witnessed. Instead, it had been strengthened by their shared resolve. They stood together, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, and as Dao Ma looked to the future, he understood the truth of his journey. The blade in his hand, the battles he had fought, and the enemies he had slain were all part of a greater story, one that transcended personal vengeance and became a legacy of unity and strength. The world was at a crossroads, but Dao Ma knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, and the road would not be easy. But the warriors of Red Cliff had shown that even in the darkest times there could be light, and that light would guide them forward. For Dao Ma, the battle was over, but the story of his people, his fallen comrades, and the ember blade would live on, carved into the very soul of the land. His name would be remembered, not for the blood he had spilled, but for the hope he had carried through the fires of war. The legacy of the Ember Blade would echo through the ages, a symbol of resilience, sacrifice, and the indomitable will to overcome. As the sun rose higher, the lands of the Red Cliff were bathed in its golden light, a new dawn, a new beginning.